this is my review of Assassination Classroom. Okay, so in this episode, we finally learn Itona's backstory. It starts off with him fighting against Korosensei, and that doesn't really last long. I'll get to that in a minute, but in the process throughout this episode, we actually learn a bit more about Itona's backstory and how he came to come under the care of Shiro and how he gained his tentacles. So it starts off with Itona and Korosensei fighting in the giant scaffolding that Shiro had set up beforehand, and Shiro reveals that this was part of his plan. He used Korosensei's own integrity and to basically just spread rumors that he was a underwear thief, and use that to lure Korosensei into a trap, knowing full well that he would fight to protect his own integrity with the students and regain his students' respect. And use that to just lower him into a trap. And also during this, he also remarks that he's actually fitted Itona's tentacles with special gloves that are basically like giant anti-sensei knives. They just cover the entire length of the tentacle and give Itona more offensive power. So between that and the fact that Korosensei is running into the sheets and the walls of the scaffolding, it's slowly wearing himself out. So he's slowly wearing himself out and unable to actually fight back against Itona, or at least initially, until finally Korosensei starts taking it seriously and reveals that he's actually learned quite a bit about Itona's fighting style in the several times that they fought together, pointing out that he learns that as a teacher he learns as much from his students as his students do from him. So and from that he was able to discern Itona's fighting style and actually figures. And by this point, he's able to fully counteract against it and has countermeasures against it. And at this point, and after a while of this, he reveals that he actually picked up a new technique after unleashing his absolute defense form, and that he doesn't need to compress all of his power, but that he doesn't need to compress his entire body down to create the energy blast that he did, but by using the tips of his tentacles to do a similar effect, he can actually create a smaller, more controllable version of it, and uses that to blow away the scaffolding and knock Itona out. At which point Korosensei catches Itona and remarks that this is the end and that Shiro should let Itona be in his care now, pointing out that he's his teacher and that it's his job to care for Itona and show him the right path. And Shiro still begins to speak about how he feels like Korosensei is selling him short a little bit. At which point Itona has a bit of a panic attack. As it turns out, and according to Shiro, Itona's tentacles were slowly eating away at his brain, mainly because they're attached directly to his scalp, but they're slowly consuming his abilities. They were slowly eating away at his brain and his sanity, and that this third loss against Korosensei most likely is what pushed him over the edge, and remarks that Korosensei should take care to be more protective of students, and with that he abandons Itona, pointing out that while he does feel for the boy and that he realizes that Itona is most likely going to perish within 3 days unless they can figure out how to keep his tentacles under control, that he does need to move on to other plans, and that those plans no longer involve him. So with that he leaves. At which point Itona escapes and runs off. And Korosensei and the rest of the students try to figure out a plan of attack to actually rein him in and figure out what's to do with him now that he's no longer under the control of Shiro and also is going kind of batshit. So Korosensei remarks that he's going to go after him as his teacher, and that as long as he's his teacher, he's going to try and protect him. Even though Karma is specifically, but Korosensei. But the class just kind of voices their concerns about how Korosensei probably shouldn't go after Itona, pointing out that it's probably not the best idea since he knows that Shiro is likely planning something, and that if he goes after Itona, that's only going to spell disaster for him. But Korosensei remarks that he can't leave a student in peril, and leaves and goes to go find Itona. And we do find out what Itona is doing. As it turns out, Itona has been attacking several cell phone stores around the city for reasons that are actually played into his backstory. So throughout the episode, we actually learn more and more about his backstory. I'll get into that in a minute, but throughout the episode, we actually see things from Itona's perspective, and he knows about his father. We actually are introduced to his father, kind of, sort of, not really. We never actually see his backstory. We never actually see his father's face, but we do find out about his father eventually, and how his father used to believe that if you work hard and try to accomplish anything, that anything is possible, which Itona apparently doesn't believe in at least anymore, for reasons that are relevant to the plot of this episode. And also we find out from a flashback regarding Itona as well, that Shiro remarks that if a proper study regimen isn't maintained, within a few days, as pointed out, within a few days, the tentacles will eventually consume him and kill him. So yeah, in addition to actually, in addition to the tentacles on his head actually consuming his sanity and his body, there was actually a steady regimen that he had to take that with Itona's maintenance from Shiro, that would enable him to survive long enough to kill Korosensei. But now that Shiro has cut him loose, he's now no longer able to perform that role. But eventually, the class act does manage to corner Itona, and Korosensei talks him down, pointing out that he doesn't need to actually fight and destroy everything, pointing out that he's his teacher, and that it's his job to help him become a better version of himself, and that he can help it, and that he can actually help him remove the tentacles if he'll let him. But at which point Shiro actually shows up again, revealing that he actually used Itona to lure Korosensei into a trap, throwing several smoke bombs that are actually made with Ensei-sensei powder, which causes not so much causes Korosensei to become injured, but causes him to melt somewhat enough that he's too slow. At which point Shiro captures Itona in a net and drags him off, pointing out that if Korosensei wants him, that he should come get him. Although he points out that Korosensei can't play teacher forever, and that eventually he is going to have to show his true colors. And then drags Itona off in a truck. So at which point Korosensei and the rest of his students actually emerge from the building. And he tells them that he's planning to go after Shiro again, and asks if anybody's hurt, and they aren't. So satisfied, he leaves. At which point Karma remarks that this is something that he asks everybody else if they notice, but as it turns out, when Korosensei's students are on the line, his reaction time slows down a bit, and Itona is no exception. Karma realizes this, as does everybody else, and they realize they need to go find Korosensei and Itona before something bad happens to Korosensei. So with that, they go looking for him. And Korosensei does eventually find Itona just bound up in a net in the middle of a field, and goes to try and free him. Although eventually Shiro does reveal that was actually a trap, and that he uses several of the pressure beams, like the ones that he hid under his wrist, as well as several shooters in the trees to keep Korosensei on his toes, knowing full well that this will eventually slow him down and eventually will kill him, as well, in addition to the fact that his reaction time slows down when he's trying to protect a student. So, and Shiro is using this as a plan to actually defeat Korosensei, using his own abilities, his own ability to defend his students and keep them safe, to basically just kind of stop Korosensei in his tracks. But unfortunately, it does not work, because right at that moment, the students come forward and actually defeat Shiro's shooters. At which point Korosensei finally confronts Shiro and tells him to leave and back down. And Shiro does reluctantly, pointing out that clearly his strategy needs more work if he's planning to face off against Korosensei and defeat him, knowing full well that he's a bit of that he does view Korosensei as a monster, and knows that he's kind of playing double half and half, he knows he's gonna destroy the world, but he also knows that he's actually trying to do his best, and he knows that conflicting nature is going to eventually get Korosensei killed. So but he remarks that he will eventually find a strategy to actually defeat Korosensei, and then leaves. And at which point the students realize that the net that Itona's in is made of anti-sensing material, and they not only cut him out of it, but they also turn it into a bandana to keep his tentacles under control until they can figure out what's wrong with him and why and how to actually save him. At which point Fuwa actually offers a reasonable explanation, and this is something that's been playing out throughout the rest of the episode. But as it turns out, Itona's mom and dad, they actually ran a company that was trying to rival. Basically, it was an electronics company trying to rival Apple, and that they were able to figure that out because Itona was attacking cell phone stores, which is something that his father did for a living, and also finds out that the CEO of the company actually had a son. But then when the company went bankrupt, he and his wife left Itona behind with his uncle, which as we find out in the episode is how Shiro found him, knowing that he had an eyes for vengeance and strength, and that he would need that to be able to use the tentacles to their fullest potentials, and which is when he kind of adopted Itona. Basically, he took Itona under his wing and used the tentacles to make him stronger. And they quickly realize that they need to figure out a way to actually remove the tentacles. And Korosensei responds that isn't going to be so easy, since the tentacles typically respond to the emotion that is strong, they're trying to enhance when they're strongest, which is an interesting plot point regarding the tentacles themselves. But the tentacles are actually built around, kind of latching onto whoever the person is, and using their own emotions to fuel themselves, and that as long as those emotions and thoughts remain inside Itona, they're never going to be able to remove them. At which point, Terasaga and his crew decide to reel him in and decide to take them under their wing and cheer him up. They actually bring him to Hibata Bayashi's soba shop where he and his father sell noodles. And Itona, because of his backstory, how we know that how he doesn't have a very high opinion of his father in business. Basically, he just openly states very matter-of-factly that the recipe is very outdated by a couple of generations, and that it needs a very more modern reboot, as it were. They need to update the recipe because it is out of date, and he knows exactly what's wrong with it. At which point Hirabayashi actually realized that Itona actually does know his stuff. At which point Yoshida decides that Itona actually does need something a bit more modern, and decides to take on bike riding, which doesn't end well because Yoshida apparently does not have a license, and Itona just kind of falls off. At which point Terasaga finally gets fed up with all of his friends trying to and failing to cheer Itona up, pointing out that they don't really know that they clearly don't know what they're doing, and that they're trying, and that even though they're trying their best, and even the rest of the class remarks that off to the side because they're just kind of there watching the whole thing, but eventually this winds up becoming too much for Itona, and he rips off the bandana and lets his tentacles loose, pointing out that he's not weak like them, and that he's strong, and that he will defeat Korosensei regardless of how many times it takes. And this is the thing that Terasaga actually hones in on, pointing out that he knows that that you can't win every single time. He points that out, he kind of outright just points that out to Itona, who apparently hasn't figured out that it doesn't matter how many times you fail, as long as you eventually succeed once. It doesn't matter. And he points out that it doesn't really matter if they're going to kill Korosensei or not, so long as they actually defeat him by March. And Itona realizes that it finally realizes it's okay to fail, and that he doesn't need to work so hard, and also realizes thanks to Terasaga that he can actually bring his family back by saving their business, by reopening their factory when he gets older, and that's a goal he can strive for. And with that, the fight in his eyes actually kind of leaves him in a very visual way, a very literal way, At which point, Korosensei is finally able to remove the tentacles from Itona's head, and Itona is happy that he no longer has his power, is kind of bittersweet happy that he no longer has his power anymore, but that he has actually gained friends instead. And with that, Itona actually joins Class 3E properly now. He is now friends with Tarasaga and his crew, and now hangs out with them. But he's gained friends, even though he's lost his power, and he knows it's still bittersweet. But now Itona can actually grow as a person now that he's no longer. Not only is no longer under Shiro's thumb, and now that he no longer has the tentacles influencing his thoughts, he's now able to actually grow as a person, and that's going to be interesting to see going forward. This was a big episode for Itona. This describes how Itona actually came to be, well, Itona, and now that he's actually started realizing that he doesn't need to be the strongest all the time, and also that he now has a goal to strive for. It's going to be interesting seeing how his character develops, because he didn't really have much of a character. He was just kind of obsessed with the idea of being Korosensei for the longest time, and didn't really have anything other than that. So now that he's actually around, well, proper people, it's going to be interesting seeing how he actually develops as a person. But in any case, that's my review of Assassination Classroom. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel. I do post news and stuff over there that are kind of important to the channel, and how I actually relay information. So be sure to check that out. And if you want to help support the show, then be sure to check out my Patreon. It's only a couple bucks a month. It helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I was saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. And also, if you want to actually find more content on the channel to see what you may like and kind of get started, because there's a lot of content on the channel, then be sure to check out either the sidebar or the end screen. The sidebar usually suggests videos based on what you want to watch, and my end screen is specifically tailored to what my newest videos are and what are best for you. So check out the end screen if you want to know where to go to get started. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!